Welcome to the On Assignment podcast. I'm John Harvey here with my co-host Will Drlik. Will, how you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
Doing great. Excited about today, as always. Want to read something here to get us started today and our subject that we're going to discuss on today's episode. In America today, young men are facing unprecedented challenges, and the numbers tell a troubling story. While young women are entering the workforce in record numbers, with labor force participation rising by 6 percentage points in the last decade, young men have largely stagnated. Around a fifth of men in their 20s still live with their parents, and nearly 700,000 fewer men aged 25 to 34 are working compared to two decades ago. But this is about more than just jobs. Young men are increasingly feeling aimless, uncertain about their place in society, and struggling with mental health at alarming rates. Depression and suicide among men are on the rise, fueled by isolation, lack of purpose, and shifting societal expectations. The traditional pathways to adulthood, education, career, family, seem less defined, leaving many young men adrift. Take Daniel Moreno, a 25-year-old from Miami. He left college during his sophomore year, unsure of what he wanted to do. 5 years later, he still hasn't found a clear path. He lives at home, working in his father's appliance repair business. He's grateful for the work, but not seeing it as his future. He wants to return to school and maybe study journalism, veterinary medicine, or botany, but he struggles to find the motivation to take that first step. He admits, the biggest obstacle is myself. I feel so lost. Now, Daniel's story isn't unique. It represents a growing crisis among young men in America, a crisis of purpose, identity, and direction. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Why are so many young men struggling? And what role do faith and community play in addressing these challenges? And most importantly, what can we do to reclaim confidence, purpose, and meaning in those young men's lives? And so we're going to talk about that today. And that's the reason why we have brought in a very special guest that I'm actually really excited to have not only be a special guest, but he's our first guest ever. And he's Taylor Rose. Welcome to the show, Taylor.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here and dive into these topics. Do you want me to just go into a little bit of my...
Well, let me say this first. I've known Taylor for about 6 years now, and Taylor is 18 years old, 18 years young, I should say. And in those 6 years, I've gotten to watch him, go through his teenage years. And one of the reasons why I wanted to invite him onto the podcast was because I've seen those years. I've seen how he's developed. I've seen his family at work. And I believe that what is going on in Taylor's life as he goes through his teenage years and then he begins this transition from an adolescent into a young man, I've been so impressed with what I've seen in Taylor's life. I've seen the way he makes decisions. I've seen the way he lives his life, the way he treats other people, and the way that he's like there's been times where I've needed help with certain events or activities, and just kind of his willingness just to step in immediately, say yes, and dive in 100%. And I feel like that sometimes as I get older, that I can lose sight of what it's like to be a teenager in today's times and a young man in today's times. And coming through COVID, coming through all the challenges that our nation has faced, I thought, what better way to capture that context than to bring a young guy on the show and have his voice heard. And I thought, man, Taylor's the perfect guy for that. And so Taylor, we want to hear a bit about your story. We want to have a conversation about how can we help young men today discover who they are, what their purpose is, what they're about, so that they can actually transition from being an adolescent into being a young man in a way where they're navigating that path with confidence and faith and knowing that God has good things for them. And I thought, Taylor will be a great guy to have your input into that. So thanks for being with us today. Welcome to the show again. Let's hear a little bit about your background, where you're coming from, so that our listeners can get to know you the way that I've gotten to know you a little bit.
So my name is Taylor Rose. I'm 18. Thank you for the warm introduction.
Yeah.
I was born in Juneau, Alaska, at the same hospital my mom was born in. So I grew up for the first 6 years of my life in Juneau, Alaska, which is a small coastal town. It's actually the capital city of Alaska. Then 12 years ago, actually, my parents decided, they heard God tell them to move to Oregon. So when I was 6 years old, we packed up our stuff. I still remember the day we left in the cargo box that we packed all of our stuff in, and our table was the last thing in. I just remember cramming it in there, and we took off on an adventure to Oregon. Now, a little bit of backstory: my mom she grew up a little bit in Oregon because my grandma is from Oregon, but that being said, this was an adventure, and my formative years were spent really just taking risks and taking with my family because, long story short, my parents got fired right after that we moved. So we were just we're on a roller coaster. I mean, I remember like having to believe with my family for paychecks to come in, having to believe and having family meetings of prayer sessions of, guys, we need a paycheck to come in to pay this month's rent.
That's good.
So that was my formative years, and the Lord has just radically blessed our family. I come from a line of pastors as well. So my dad is a pastor at the Collective Church here in Taggart, Oregon. And my grandpa is still a pastor in Juneau, Alaska. And that's really the family legacy that I come from as a pastoral. So I think it's pretty cool that I'm able to follow in their footsteps in ministry. With that being said, I am a cart boy at a country club here in Oregon, and I'm a worship. I lead worship, and I play guitar and do music. And that's really my passion. That's what I love. That's what my heart burns for. And I'm a youth leader as well in our youth group. So it's fun to see kids go from knowing them all the way from sixth grade, that'd be 11 and 12. Like John is saying, up until they're seniors in high school. I've grown up with a lot of these kids, and it's really a blessing to be able to pour into people. So that's what my heart burns for. That's a little bit of my story. But I'm rooted in Juneau, Alaska and Portland. These are my two homes.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Very cool. Yeah. So you're 18. When I was 18, I struggled and had a complete lack of stewardship. It sounds like your parents have done a really good job of instilling stewardship in you and faith and trust and walking you through that. But when I got my first job right out of high school, I think I was making, just to give you an idea of where I was at.
Right.
Stewardship-wise.
How long ago was this?
This was 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay, great.
Yeah. So 18, fresh out of high school, first job, stoked.
Yep.
Feel rich.
Oh, yeah,
so
I
think I was making $900 a month.
Sweet. Yeah.
First thing I do, run to the bank, get a truck payment. That was, I want to say $300 a month, but I think that's on the low side.
Wow.
So that's where I was at financially right out of high school and stewardship wise. So I had a complete lack of stewardship. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And we think of stewardship as money, but it's also relationships, time.
Mm.
We need to be good stewards. And so, looking back on my life, I wish there was someone around to teach me that stewardship and hone that in, because it's detrimental to now, knowing where I'm at now. It's kind of like a rebuilding. I'm rebuilding what was tore down,
Mm-hmm.
What started at 18,
Yeah.
that lack of stewardship, having an understanding of stewardship. Now I have an understanding of it, but there's a rebuilding that takes place. There's a renewing of your mind. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is how at your age do you have such a good and well understanding of stewardship, and what did your parents teach you about it, and what are you doing to apply yourself for the future? Because I think as a young man, I wish that I would have had someone that I could have listened to, either that's your age or like a mentor, kind of speak that stewardship into life, that like what you're doing right now matters.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like your decisions right now matter. So looking at your future, I probably shouldn't have blown almost 50% of my income on a truck and the rest go to gas.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
Yeah.
And those are things that you learn, but
Yeah.
those are also building habits. It's
Yeah.
building bad habits
Mhm.
at that age.
Right.
And then the more money you make, the more I can get from the bank. And this is just a financial thing, but also it happens in relationships and time.
Yeah.
Like the more time that I get, I can waste more. As I get more involved in relationships, if I don't steward my relationships, I get more and more trust.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we could be really good stewards or we could be bad stewards. So
That's good.
how are you a good steward? Because I see it in you. I see it in your parents. I see the values that your family brings, and how you guys live. So how did they learn? How'd they teach you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think the first thing that they really taught me is, and this is going back to my grandpa too, they taught me that my life is not my own. So therefore, my core value is actually to serve others.
Mm-hmm.
My core value is whatever I do is actually tied to somebody else. When I go through life and when I make a big financial decision, I'm not necessarily, I obviously have things that I want and that I pursue and that I'll buy for myself as well. But I think when we make these big decisions, is having others in mind, of legacy, and it's actually my future. I know that when I have a wife and when I have kids, that I'll want to deposit good habits into them, and because that's really my desire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's serving others and keeping other people in your peripheral vision, because if we get locked in and zoned in, this is what I see so often with some of the people I've helped mentor, or my friends, and the people I'm accountable to, is we, even in my flesh, I can get so zoned into what I'm doing that I don't even think about looking at other people. I don't even think about looking at other people's financial situations, or thinking about how blessed, and it's really just that posture of,
Yeah, and it's so easy to do with all the distractions that we have.
Absolutely.
Like the enemy just keeps on throwing distractions to distract you away from, and I totally catch myself in that too, where it's like, man, I need to take a step back. Look at the big picture here.
Yes.
It's not all about me and all my distractions. Maybe there's someone else there's distractions being thrown at them that they need prayer for,
Mm-hmm.
I need to take a step back. So that's really good. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. To understand at that age about legacy, to understand that the decisions that you make today impact not only your day to day, but your future, is so critical, because what we see happening so often is young guys coming out of high school and beginning to make decisions for themselves when they've never had to make decisions before. Right. And so you've got this progression through your life where, as a boy, your parents make decisions for you, or whoever's taking care of you, and you're doing things like going to school, you're going to your sports practice, you're doing these things that are laid out for you to do, to where someone else is actually guiding you along the path.
Mm-hmm.
Then you step out of high school and you're thrust into a level of independence where, if you're not prepared for that with an understanding of the value and importance of your daily decision making, it's easy to not know what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
How do I make decisions on the daily? How do I actually figure out what I'm supposed to do? Because everyone's always told me what I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of this transition from being an adolescent boy to becoming a young man, you're hitting the nail on the head with the fact that you've got to have vision for the future. You've got to have a vision that goes beyond where you're at today,
Mm-hmm.
because leadership is really critical every stage in our lives. And it's very critical at that transitional stage from adolescence to becoming a young man. And as we see our country's cycle of fatherlessness continue, we see these adolescent boys with no fathers not being shown or told or taught how to make good decisions. And therefore, they enter into this transitional season and they never transition out of adolescence. They never actually take the steps to becoming young men. And we see adolescence extending into the late 20s and early 30s. And you've got men who are not prepared for life. They're just kind of saying, hey, I'm just going to live for the moment. I'm going to enjoy today. And in that place, when you try and interject responsibility, it feels like a heavy burden. Mm-hmm. When you try and interject doing something that you don't want to do for someone else that might help someone else out, it's like, no, that does not sound fun at all. And decisions begin then to get made based on the context and point of view of what do I like to do? What do I want to do? What's fun? What's not fun? And then you're not prepared or ready at all, even when you want to transition into manhood, to do that, because you've had a life of making decisions that reject entirely everything it takes to be a man.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying there, Taylor, is so critical, and your grandfather was so wise in teaching you about legacy, about teaching you that life is more than just about yourself and that your life is not your own. I love that, because what that does is it puts you in a position to where you're beginning to learn to make decisions not based upon the moment, not based upon how you feel right now. I'm sure there's times when you don't feel like doing what you need to do. And so tell us a little bit about that part of that adjustment. Like, real quickly, I remember it was the summer before my junior year in high school, and I got my first job on a framing crew. And I had always worked up to that point. Even I'd worked for a landscaping company when I was 14 and 15 in the summers. And then before then, I always had my own site. I was doing lawn mowing and that kind of thing. So I'd always worked, right? And so that summer, though, I got my first job with a framing crew. That was 1985. That's a few years ago. I remember the shock, though, of the first day of work, where it was heavy, because I was just basically a grunt hauling lumber. Mm-hmm. It was hotter than Hades and humid. And I was used to the heat at levels with the landscaping and being exposed to this was in Missouri. The Missouri summers were hot and humid and kind of miserable. But that first day of just like, it was when you're landscaping, you go and you mow a yard and then you get back into the truck and the AC and then you drive to another job and you get these little breaks in between. And this was like all day humping lumber. And I just remember it being like 11 or 12 and it felt like I'd been working for days and I was exhausted, worn out. My hands were not tough yet. I was not physically fit for it. But the shock to the system is what I'm saying to a boy at that point, entering into a place of taking on hard work. And responsibility is hard work. Serving is hard work. Living a life of service is hard work. And so there's a shock to your system at some point where you're like, I actually have to step into this because I don't want to. But that's part of this transitional process of going from a boy to a man. So in your experience, Taylor, how has that been played out when you've been asked to do things that you didn't want to do? What was it that actually got you to say yes? What was it that you've used to kind of, and I think it plays into what you've already said, but what is it that kind of pushes you into that place of leaving your comfort zone and stepping into that uncomfortable zone?
I really believe it is, again, legacy. I mean, it really is, because there is a lot of days where I don't feel like going to work. And when I don't feel, I mean, I am a part-time bagroom employee, which is a pretty easy job. But then I do serve, like John said, at a lot of his events and church events, ministry events. And there's a lot of times when I have to kick myself to go. And I really think perspective is a huge deal. I mean, there's been times when worship teams get up pretty early,
Mhm.
well, 6 a.m.
Yeah.
and which after working morning shifts at the country club, I'll get up and I'll work at 4:30, 5:30 a.m. in the summers. And so there's a lot of mornings where I don't have a lot of sleep. And there's been a lot of times when I haven't done it right. But the few times that I have done it right, I think have really impacted others and like what you've seen in me, John.
Mhm.
But I mean, a practical thing that I do, I'll get in the car. If I'm like really having a terrible morning, I'll need to get in the car, roll the windows down, just get some fresh air, take a breath, step back. I think catching what what you said about stepping back and going, okay, today is a day. Today is the day that the Lord has made. Not to use Christianese right there, but honestly, it really is just taking a step back, breathing a little bit, going, okay, I'm going to slow down for 5 minutes so that I can speed up for the next 25.
Yeah.
It's really about, it's not that manufactured rush. I don't know if this is on the topic, but there's a manufactured rush to, I got to be here and I got to be here and I got to be here and I got to be here. And if I'm not there, I think this even applies with after high school, going into college, after college, going into jobs. My friends are all going to college. So what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is literally this year in September and October. My friends are all off at college. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life?
Yeah. And it's instilled in us in our culture of like, if you don't go to college, you're not doing something right, or you're missing out on, or you feel like the pressure of, okay, I need to get ahead because I'm not doing that. And so that tension is difficult. But university isn't for everyone.
It's
There's
not for everybody.
so many different ways to be successful and to live out God's calling in your life other than going to school, I think.
Absolutely.
But to kind of hit on what we're talking about, it's that uncomfortability and that pressure builds character. Doing something. I can't think of a time where me doing something easy or smooth sailing has built character in me. It's those times where it's the times that you don't want to go to those things that you're talking about, those events. It's those times where you don't want to go to work, but you push through. You don't want to go do that workout. It's that tension and that uncomfortability that really builds character, builds grit, and something that you can dive into and fall back on when you're moving forward, and to keep you going, and it just continues to build that character in you.
Yeah.
Doing those hard things.
Yeah. You don't see the value of it at first, but at some point you begin to see the value of it.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had topics before on this podcast where it's, once you look back and to see the steps that you've gone through, just walking by faith, doing things that are uncomfortable. And then you look back on your life and you're like, oh, look at all that that God's brought me through. And I've been able to achieve with his help, and just putting my faith in him, and just the growth and the character of going through hard things, doing hard stuff, doing stuff that not everyone wants to do, doing things that are uncomfortable, starting your own business, or taking those leaps of faith that a lot of people don't do, or waking up at 5 a.m. to do that workout, waking up at 5 a.m. to go lead worship and have a powerful encounter with God and lead people through that powerful encounter with God. Because you might not reap the benefit, you might not see the benefit, but those people that are there that you led worship through on that morning that you didn't want to get up, maybe they had a very significant encounter with God that you were a part of.
Yeah.
Like the pictures, that's another reason why taking a step back, the picture is so much bigger than ourselves and our comfort.
I've actually found on those days specifically, when it is hard to get up, when it is hard to get in the car and pack up my gear and go to the church, those are actually the days when the Lord really, it just moves so freely in a service. And when people do get wrecked and people do get rocked and life transformation happens, because I agree, in the grind, that's really where, I mean, that's character. That's being integrous is waking up every day and taking accountability for your actions, and just taking accountability for I'm going to show up to work on time today. I'm going to show up to church on time today. And I'm making a choice to go, even though I had a hard morning, even though I didn't get enough food in, I didn't have a nice diner meal, even though I didn't have my coffee today, I'm going to make the choice to actually be kind. I'm going to make the choice to give someone a smile when I don't feel like smiling.
Yeah.
Because that happens more often than not. But I've noticed as I have done this more and more, and again, I'm not perfect, it actually becomes usual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I the first year and a half of doing worship was really hard. And now I'm coming into my third and fourth year of doing worship, and it has gotten more routine. Not that I ever take communing with the Lord, for granted, but it really has impacted my life to where it feels natural,
Right.
to push through.
Yeah. The foundational elements are in place that allow you to actually extend into other areas and to grow as in your abilities to actually go deeper and to go further. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you start with the basics, you master the basics, and then you take another step, you level up. Right. So that's really good. I love what we're talking about. And I remember that when my son was in his high school years, he was an athlete playing different sports and that kind of thing. And a lot of times on Saturday nights, he'd be active and out and doing stuff. And we had a rule that we never really set a strict curfew with our kids, but they had to let us know like at 11 o'clock where they were at, where they were going to be. And so that way, if something came down, we could contact them. And the caveat to that is that, with Austin, we were working with a church that didn't have its own building at the time. And so we had to take trailers to the church building in the morning and then unload the trailers and set up the whole set the church space up. We were actually at a couple different locations, but the idea of that was we had to, be there at 6:30 a.m. every Sunday to set up for the service. And so the rule for my son, Austin, was you can stay out Saturday nights, hang out with your buddies, do what you want to do, but check in at 11. I'll probably be asleep or already out, but you're going to get up and you're going to help me. And I don't want any pushback on that because you're making decisions tonight that impact your day tomorrow.
That's good.
And it was that same thing where it's like he did great with that. It was a very solid, guideline, and he did great with that. He was always there, always willing, always helpful. And that investment of time impacted lives that he doesn't even know about. So I think the legacy piece that you're talking about goes far beyond family legacy of a future wife and children and grandchildren and being part of this line of legacy, because it expands out from there so much greater. The number of lives that you touch because of what you're investing and you're stewarding is so much greater than what you could even imagine or think, that you'll find out one day once you cross the line into eternity. So I think it's important for young guys to know that living, when you count your life as not your own and you live for the purposes that God has for you, and you step out of that place of being in your comfort zone or your familiar zone, and you step out of that and you say yes to things, that's where that process and the transition from being an adolescent boy to becoming a young man starts.
Yeah, that's good.
And so look for opportunities to do that. If you don't have a father in your life who's there to kind of give you guidelines and to kind of help you in that process, allow God to lead you in that. What's God speaking to you to do? What moves your heart? Is there something at your church? Is there something with your young adult group? Or is there something at your school where you could step into something that kind of is uncomfortable, but it's going to help grow you?
Yeah.
And to where you're stewarding something beyond yourself. You're actually taking care of a responsibility or some type of involvement that's going to impact the lives of other people. Live for those people around you, not just for yourself.
Yes.
One of the beautiful things that Jesus said is, he says, when I came here, I didn't come to serve. I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve.
Mm-hmm.
I came to literally lay my life down.
Mm-hmm.
And in light of eternity, this life is just a blip on the screen in light of how long eternity is. And what we do though in this blip matters so much,
Yeah.
and it affects eternity so much that we would be short-sighted to live this little blip on the screen of eternity for ourselves and not live for the purposes of God. And so to the young men who are listening out there, pursue purpose, pursue a life that's lived not just for yourself and your own interest, but pursue the things that move you, that inspire you, that burden you. Take actions to step into opportunities to serve, to get uncomfortable. Maybe it means getting up early, staying out late, going to a meeting that you didn't necessarily want to go to, but there's something there, there's someone there that God's gonna use you to speak into their life. But step into those uncomfortable situations so that there's opportunity, and God will work that out.
Yeah.
And he will honor your choices, just like we hear he's honoring Taylor's choices.
Yeah. And seek other people that want that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much power in community and shared suffering.
Mm-hmm.
The best teams in the world are the ones that suffer together, the ones that do hard things together. So be that man yourself, but also surround yourself with people that have that same mentality than you, and lead the other people around you to want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
The most tight knit that I feel at the firehouse is after a tough call or a tough workout, or just some sort of shared suffering that we got to conquer together and go through. And maybe it didn't go perfect. We can talk about it, say, hey, these are some things that we could do better. But those are the times where we're the tightest and most closest and just on the same page. And it just feels really, really good to be a part of a team like that. And then apply that to your family. Like, go do hard things, go work out together, or go on a hike together, or serve together.
Mm-hmm.
Get up early in the morning together. Say, we are going to be a family that goes to church every single day. That maybe that, I mean, that's a big step for some people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that come up. Hey, we're just not feeling it today. There's a lot of those thoughts that come in of just kind of being weak, of I don't want to do it. Well, let's grind. Let's get some grit together and let's do it. Let's show up.
Really
and there's
good.
going to be some impact that happens. So community,
Yeah.
I know we wanted to talk about that today, and just seeking other people that have that same mentality. And there's something about shared suffering that creates the most just top-notch teams.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it on the military podcasts of the
Yeah.
guys that are a part of a team that suffer together are the best.
That's a wrap for this week's episode. Join us next week as we continue the conversation with Taylor Rose on fighting isolation and staying connected, and how to lead with social media. Until next week, stay on the path.